Now joined by Billy Childs from Britny Fox. How are you, Billy?
I'm doing great, yeah, I'm doing really good.
Oh, man, we're so excited to have you guys back out, coming back to Hollywood, doing it big on the Sunset Strip, as always. I know you got new recordings in the works and all that, but if we could kind of get a little backstory, we'd love to let everybody know, how you got involved in this crazy business and all that. I know you come from Philadelphia. Tell us about, growing up. Who was the musical heroes that really inspired you to want to do this?
Well, I guess for me, when I was growing up, it was I was really a big Sabbath guy, man. I love Sabbath, and I guess a lot of those '70s bands, like Humble Pie. I liked, Deep Purple, Zeppelin. Just all those kind of bands. And then as I got a little bit older, I started just looking about, more what was happening around the scene around my way. And I guess a few of the bands around my way became kind of like heroes to me because they were like real big. I'm not talking about bands anybody's ever heard of, really, but
sure.
Just the bigger club bands.
Well, that's awesome. With so much of that great music coming out of the 70s, like you say, like a Humble Pie and Deep Purple and Zeppelin, that music is today probably as timeless as ever. And I know it was pre-MTV and pre-digital, but what else do you think was it about that era that music still sounds so timely and really hasn't been beat since?
Well, I think, it seems to me that the bands actually were probably better players and had more room to experiment that back then. Like, nobody really had to stay to the formula like what happened in my decade, for example. It was very formulaic. There was some good stuff that came out of it, but it was starting to become really big business, and you have formulas that were adhered to. Where I think in the '70s, I don't really think. Bands were doing well, but they weren't selling like. If you did a platinum record in the '70s, man, I think that was pretty rare and like really big. By the time you're in the '80s, you have bands, almost routinely going platinum, in some respects. So I think it was less of a business. And I think the emphasis was just more on, the business to me is, rock music seems to be constantly evolving, and it still is, even though there's not very many bands evolving it right now, because let's face it, rock isn't really the huge dominant art form these days. I hope I didn't ramble on too much there.
No, that's what it's all about. I do think that music, it was more organically made. The labels weren't trying to predict or force a hit. They were letting the bands do what they do best. That's why we had so much diversity, out in the market. And I know it was. I know you still to this day probably are playing some of that great Zeppelin stuff. Have a love for it. But I know back in the '80s, again, things were exploding with Bon Jovi and Poison, and of course Cinderella, which you guys were connected with, and Warrant and Motley Crue and Whitesnake and GNR and Dokken and everything. Talk about the evolution, because I know a couple of your guys had played in earlier versions of Cinderella, but talk about the excitement, that MTV was causing and being up there in the Northeast, with bands like Bon Jovi busting out. What that was like and how that evolved for you guys getting your deal.
Oh, man, well, I'll tell you, for me, it really opened my eyes because really before I saw Cinderella get a deal, I had heard about Bon Jovi, but I didn't know anybody from that band, really, although ironically, I had jammed with Snake Sabo much earlier. That was a really odd band we had together, kind of a recording thing. But Philadelphia and Sayreville, where he's from, really aren't that far apart, So a lot of us, there was a lot of interaction between those areas back then.
Sure.
But as I say, I saw Cinderella get a deal, man, and when I saw them get a deal, that was the first people that I'd ever really known that it actually made it happen, and we're getting on MTV and had a deal, the major and everything. Like, it seemed to me like most of those people at that point were from L.A. or from New York, one or the other. Now, we did deal with New York a good deal because it's not that far away. And the people from New York, I don't know if you noticed, but man, you can't get them out of New York. So you basically have to go into the city to play, if you want to be heard. So that helped us out, a good deal. And like I said, when I saw Cinderella do it, I guess that's when it really struck me that, like, wow, this really can be done. Because before, I had never really looked at things like that. I mean, I was just looking to get in a rock band that was fun and that was fairly cool and that I could make a living at, and that would play up and down the East Coast or something. You know what I mean? I wasn't exactly aiming for the stars, so to speak, just because it seemed so unrealistic to me.
Sure. And so it's happening in your block or somebody it seems like a Cinderella fairy tale, so to speak.
Yeah, it did to me. Like I said, I mean, I heard about it, and I heard secondhand stories about, I know this guy, and this guy knows that guy, and I'm like, I know you, but I don't know any of these people. So it was all like second and third hand, relationships to me. So I just never believed it until I saw guys that were playing the same club as me actually make this happen. And they were a great band, man. Cinderella, absolutely a great band. Really good at the clubs too. Deserve that success big time, man.
Right.
Ironically, when Cinderella got big, and I believe went away to either record their album or start their tour. My memory's a little foggy at this point, but I do remember their last night at this club in Jersey called the Galaxy, run by a very good friend of mine, Bill Haig. Their last night there, the next Saturday night, was Britny Fox's first night there. So it was like kind of a seamless changeover in that respect, and we became kind of Philadelphia's new Cinderella, if you will, and then we got the deal, and we got signed, and we did fairly well.
Well, it was an amazing time. I know Metal Edge named you guys in '88 the best new band, and you're on CBS Records with some of the biggest acts, in the world, which, of course, evolved into Sony. Talk about that, that eye-opener, being able to go to Manhattan and go to the big, CBS headquarters and to be in those hallowed halls, the Aussies and the giant acts, we're coming out of.
Well, I'll tell you, brother, it's still, I mean, when I think about it to this day, it really had a very surreal feel to me, Because, like I was saying earlier, I never really thought, anything like that would happen to me, I do remember when we got the deal, I remember I was happy for about 5 minutes, and then it occurred to me that, like, okay, we have the deal. Now, if we're not successful and don't sell albums, we're not going to have this deal real long, and in 6 months, I'll be sitting back at this club on a bar, only this time I'll be the guy that had the shot that didn't make it, if you know what I'm saying. I really didn't want to be that guy, so then the whole thing started where we were somewhat used to New York anyway. I mean, we had actually gotten the cover of Kerrang! Before we even had a deal, which was never done before. We actually got the cover of that twice, I believe. And so we dealt a lot. Also, Metal Edge, too, gave us some pretty good coverage, I think, before we really got big. So, like I say, with New York, you have to go there, So we were always going there. We used to do a lot of shots with Mark Weiss.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, and he did a lot of his stuff out of New York. So we were always up there anyway.
Going to the MTV studios, what was that like?
Oh my God, that was a trip. Some of those things are smaller than you think. Like when you see an MTV show on TV or something, which I mean, really, I don't watch MTV much anymore. It's really about pop culture, and pop culture is not really about music. Those our artists today are really just conversation pieces, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They're,
a lot of those shows were shot in probably a little room with a green screen, and on TV it felt like it was on a giant theater or something.
Yeah, they make their money on tweets and likes. You know what I mean? It's not really about the art today, But that's a whole nother.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, you had a hell of a run. I mean, when Girls School hit MTV, what a monster video, and talk about that, and Long Way to Love, and shooting some of those big first videos. What was that experience like, shooting the Girls School video?
Well, once again, for me, those experiences at that point were still very surreal, man. I mean, it was almost like out of body for a guy like myself to be in that kind of position. I mean, they take us to like a huge warehouse. The Girls School video in particular was my second one, but even our first one, but I'll stick to Girls School for right now. They took me to, I didn't know what to expect. They took us to a a huge warehouse somewhere in L.A. I'm not real familiar with the town to this day, but somewhere in L.A., a big warehouse. And inside of this warehouse, that schoolroom was actually constructed. And our stage area was actually constructed. I mean, me and my relative naivete at the time, I guess I thought that we were just going to go to a schoolroom somewhere and shoot it there. You know, I didn't realize they were going to build one for the occasion, you know.
Sure.
But, I mean, and just seeing all those people and all that catering and all those cameras and obviously all those girls, like, you know, so many of these girls, and each one have basically their own attendant, be it their agent, their mother, whoever, you know what I mean?
Right. It was like a big machine, like making a mini movie that day, I'm sure.
It really was. I think from what I've seen, I mean, I'm kind of a film freak, so I've watched a lot of behind-the-scenes things on movies and stuff, and to me, a lot of those big rock videos at the time, today I don't really know who does what, you know, it doesn't seem, you know, but back then, yeah, they were like little mini movie shoots, you know? I mean, there was a part of me that always questioned, like, how much of it was just a little bit too much over the top. I mean, we did an awful lot of takes for basically the same shots that in a video you were going to see for like a half-second edit. You know what I mean? It seemed to me like we spent a lot more money than could have been spent on those things. But once again, then you're getting back into the machinery of the business, so to speak.
Well, back then, those videos cost, you know, $200,000, $300,000. I mean, these days, you know, the technology, you can go out and shoot something, you know, obviously maybe not that big of a production, but it's just a fraction of the cost, you know. But back then, like you said, it was probably 30, 40 people on the crew and catering, and it was probably a big union type, you know, operation.
Oh yeah, everything was so big, you know. That's what I say. The machinery of the industry, man, gets rolling, and unfortunately, you kind of foot the bill for a lot of that, you know. I mean, unless you do it really, really well, and then you could renegotiate. But see, we never really did. I mean, our most expensive video probably got played twice. Most people probably aren't even aware of it. It's the first video from our second album. It was a song called "Standing in the Shadows." I mean, we tried to recapture that, you know, the bigness of the Poison performance videos. Well, we had toured with them, and we got a chance to watch them make a video. And the first thing I noticed was when I watched it, I said, "Wow, you know what's really different about their videos?" And I'm like, "What?" I go, "They're telling the producers what to film." I go,
yeah.
"We do our videos, the producers are telling us what to do." I'm like, and it seems like we know better most of the time. I go, kind of like these guys.
It's got to start with your vision. These guys should be there to help you bring your vision out.
Yeah, they should be. Once again, we're getting to do the machinery of the business. You know, people are trying to involve themselves, and I'm saying that's not always a bad thing. You know, sometimes people bring some really good ideas to the table. But as I say, just to get back to that one, we tried to emulate one of those Poison performance videos and make it as big as we could and a lot of action. Actually, it came out a little darker than that. It was still a good video, though, and that was our most expensive video. And I think, I don't know, I'm going to throw the figure out, $170,000. It might even been $200,000 we spent on this video. And as I say, it got played twice. You know.
Yeah. No, I mean, you and I both know in indie film, make a movie for that, I'm sure, you know, today.
Yeah, right.
But speaking of that, I know you got a little part in the Incest Death Squad movie. What was that all about?
Oh, God, well, that's a friend of mine, Corey, from Wisconsin, man. If he happens to hear this, hello, Corey. I hope I see you soon, man. He's a filmmaker out of Wisconsin, and he was making this way over-the-top horror film called Incest Death Squad, of all things. And it had some interest. I believe he was dealing, I think the guy's name is Lloyd Kaufman, and he actually is the founder of Trauma Films.
The Trauma guys, yeah.
The Toxic Avenger, and I mean, some of these things have turned into franchises, basically, of a sort.
I mean, they were so out there. They were interesting.
Yeah, he's actually, Lloyd Kaufman actually plays like one of the leads in this movie. He's I think he plays like a movie producer, like an over the top movie producer. And anyway, I was just touring through Wisconsin, And Corey had contacted me, I think, and asked if he could use a song. I don't remember what it was in the movie. And I said, yeah, brother, I go, that's fine. And I always just ask for the hell of it when people ask me that. I said, do you think I could get like a line or two in the movie? You know what I mean? Just I always wanted to be in a movie, you know?
Doesn't hurt to ask.
And all of a sudden, Corey got back to me and said, no problem, brother. I'm going to write like a little part for you and put you in there. And he did that, and I did it, and I was absolutely horrible, and I know I have no future in the acting business.
Well, I'm sure it was another experience, at least for you. Now, I know on the Bite Down Hard album, you had Zakk Wylde and Ricky Rocket, actually guest on that album. How did those appearances come about?
Yeah, they did. Well, Zakk's been a friend of ours since long ago, since when he first joined Ozzy as a skinny guy with long blonde hair. You know what I mean? He's just from. We had a lot of common friends. When we recorded Bite Down Hard, he had just finished No More Tears with Dwayne Barron, John Purdell. Had just finished No More Tears, and he had been out there for that, so then we went right into Bite Down Hard with the same guys, so he was still hanging around the studio. And much Madden football was played, and, a lot of other stuff was done, and we just hung out. Ricky was more of a friend of Johnny D's, I think.
Okay.
I don't really know Ricky, but I know he came in at some point during the drums and did that. But that's how Zakk was there. He was friends with the producers, and a couple of studio techs are still around. I mean, you'll have the same crew a lot of times, so everybody knew each other, and we were just all into the same thing. And as I said, we shared that Philadelphia, Jersey, New York, kind of mindset, so we just always got along.
Right. Now, I know, of course, going through the years, the debut album, Boys in Heat, Bite Down Hard, Springhead, Motor Shark, all the live albums. What can you tell us about new recordings?
Well, where we're at right now, I mean, when I see press releases that came out, it kind of makes me smile a little bit because it says, like, Britny Fox is in the studio right now. Now, we're not anywhere close to that. Like, right now, man, we're just, me and Tommy are throwing ideas back and forth through files, and we've written a couple things, and we're just kind of, getting our legs back under us again, and now all of a sudden we have some gigs coming up. So we've kind of shifted gears from just worrying about that to getting this in order, I mean, this stuff's coming up pretty quick. So, yeah, that's where we're at right now. It's not quite, I mean, I was always looking at this thing as, if we can get a tune together before the winter, that would be great. But if not, I've always looked at this winter coming up as like the time to do that, and probably like a spring, even possibly early summer release, I mean, there's no rush on anybody's part. We just want to make sure we do the best we can. We want to make like another album on the level of Bite Down Hard. We don't really, Springhead was good and was what it was, but there's a whole story behind why that thing is what it is.
Right.
And we don't want to fall into that trap again. Like we've had offers for deals. I mean, of course, and I've turned them all down. We've turned them all down at this point because to me, I just don't want to put us in the same position as we did last time. I mean, with Springhead, we got forced to do an album that we were very simply not ready to do.
Sure.
And that's how that came out the way it is. Now, that being said, I really think it's got its moments, and it shows a side of us that I think most people didn't really know existed. And it turned out that we did those songs because those happened to be the best songs that we had. I mean, we tried to force a few tunes on that album, but I mean, if you hear the ballads and things like that, and just the odd tunes, a lot of it sounds like us, but a lot of it, like I say, it brings in these other parts that you probably would have never heard had we had like 6 months to write that album. It probably comes out a lot more, typical Britny Fox. It comes out probably more a little bit like Bite Down Hard or Boys in Heat or something, but
right.
That's a whole story behind that, man, and we just don't want that to happen again.
Yeah. Well, I know you got Tommy Paris out front, lead vocals, rhythm guitar, keyboards, and I know he'll always be the new guy, even though he goes all the way back to 1990. That's 25 years, of having Tommy around. But with Chris Sanders on lead guitar, but more importantly, you have Johnny D. Britny Fox, drummer on drums. What does it mean to have Johnny in the band and out there playing with you?
Oh man, well, I mean, it's great to have Johnny back. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but me and Johnny started out in his basement together. You know, I mean, I'm a few years older than him, not a whole lot, but we both started out at the same time. You know, and so that's how far back we go, actually. And we've done various things throughout both of our careers together. And it's great to be back with him. I mean, musically, that tightness is always there. You know. And after so many years in this business, it does get back to where it's nice to be around a guy that you actually knew, and you knew before any of this happened. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I knew Johnny, and he knew me before we even played a club, you know?
Sure.
I mean, and then what he brings to the table professionally is it's fantastic, you know? I mean, the guy's just had a great career. He's done a lot of things, you know?
Yeah.
So what he brings to the table in that regard is really priceless. I mean, it can't really be questioned. The experience factor, you know. And as far as Tommy, you know, he might always be the new guy, but he's never been the new guy to us. You know, he's always like, I just view him just like me and Johnny. You know what I mean? I view us all the same, really. Tommy, you know, to me, he's been here a lot longer than Dean. I think we've done our best work with Tommy. It's just a shame that nobody knows it, because I always put it this way. I say, you know, Tommy Paris is one of the best singer-songwriters of the 80s. Unfortunately, he didn't get released until the 90s, you know. So it's kind of a shame. As I said, I think, and we all kind of think, and we've heard this a million times, but and a lot of people have the same story, I'm sure, but if Bite Down Hard comes out 2 years earlier than it does, we probably sell 5 million of that.
Yeah.
Not because we're that great, but that's what bands were selling back then, and we had probably 4 or 5 tunes on there that seemed like they could have been hits, you know.
Sure.
That's how important Tommy is to us. I mean, this thing doesn't continue without Tommy, and we know that, you know. So, but not only did it continue with Tommy, it actually improved. And it seems like most of the people that hear our stuff kind of agree with that. And the stuff we did before was great. Like, I'm kind of a big fan of the Boys in Heat record myself. I think that's a real good, heavy, bluesy record, you know. Our first album was kind of a learning experience, but that was us right out of the clubs. See, we weren't together a very long time before we got that first big deal with CBS. Mm-hmm. We formed in basically we had one practice in very late 1985, right before New Year's Eve. So we didn't really start till 86, and by 87, we were a pretty big band, you know. So we were still in a learning phase, which I think explains why our second album sounds so much more mature in a lot of respects than our first does, you know.
Well, a lot of monster talent involved. We got the big shows in L.A. and Arizona, of course, back on the Sunset Strip. What are your biggest memories of coming out to L.A. for the first time and playing live and feeling that whole Cali vibe and love?
Oh man, well I remember the first time going to L.A. I was obviously impressed, because by that point L.A. had become the center of the music business, in particular what we did, you know. Yeah. So just to be there was what was amazing. We didn't do as much out there as what you would expect for some odd reason, man. Britny was really an East Coast, South, and Midwest band. Mm-hmm. But I do remember playing there, and I do remember, you know, feeling a little bit rock stars actually at that point. I'm on MTV, and I'm doing real good. We got a tour bus and all this, and we're staying at the Hyatt. And then I go down the street, and there's Poison with like 4 buses idling outside of La Mondrian. You know what I mean? I'm going like, wow, I'm not too big after all, am I? You know, it's a real reality check, you know. But I like the city. You know, we recorded Bite Down Hard there. Actually, everything else I think we did fairly East Coast, I believe. But yeah, we did everything else East Coast except for Bite Down Hard, which we spent about 6 months out in LA. And it was I have to say, it was a blast, because like I say, Ozzy was doing No More Tears,
yeah.
And he got pushed back a little bit. So I remember everybody being like, you know, Purnell and Barron and everybody being like, oh, we're really sorry this is happening. You guys will just have to, chill out for a month or so while they get this together, And I'm like, oh yeah, this is horrible. Let me hang around LA with nothing to do for a month. You know what I mean? I got a great
vacation.
It was great, man. So
well, like you say, with the tour bus thing, it's very, very important to keep your feet on the ground and remain humble and hungry. What other advice do you have to the young players, young bands? Not so much on the business, because we know that's constantly evolving, but as far as your dedication to your instrument, dedication to being the best songwriter, being the best musician and performer, what do you impart on them as far as the level of dedication, sacrifice, and perseverance they need?
Well, I'll tell you what you got to do, man. I always said this. People always say, how come you picked the music business? And, a lot of people pick the music business. I think what ends up happening is the music business picks you, if you know what I'm saying. And the guys that really want it and just have to do it, those are the guys that have futures in it, if this is something you have to dedicate yourself to. To me, dedication implies performing an action that you're not particularly crazy about, but you're dedicating yourself to it, I don't believe I've ever really dedicated myself to very much, and I didn't really do it to this. It just kind of happened. So I think if you're into it, the dedication, so to speak, just happens. You start doing it and you just go from one thing into another. I also don't believe that you really need lessons. I think it's something some of the best players of all time are completely untaught,
Sure.
And I just think it's something that happens, brother. If you were meant for it, it's liable to happen to you. And I hope it does, It's not an easy life, but like I say, it picks you, and you can't turn it down. So you kind of just have to go with it and take the good with the bad, and keep your head on straight through the whole thing, because whatever happens, it can be a motherfucker. You know what I mean? It can be a real head fuck. So you have to really make sure that you don't let things get to you. That's the best advice I can give anybody. There's nothing I can tell them that they're not going to figure out on their own.
Well, Billy, it's a real pleasure. Can't wait to see Britny Fox out here on the Sunset Strip, blowing up the stage with all those classic songs. And best of luck writing that new material. Hopefully, there's much, much more rock ahead. Thank you so much, brother.
Jay, thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy.
All right,
talk soon.
Take care.